So yeah, I've just got back from travelling 2 hours to get to the nearest IMAX to see The Dark Knight Rises, and the question is, was it worth it? Was The Dark Knight Rises any good? Yes. Was it worth travelling for 2 hours? Yes. I'll start off the review by saying The Dark Knight Rises was very good, but it was very different compared to the first two films. It seemed a lot lighter than the other two. I mean, the other two are mainly at night time, whereas there's a lot more sun in this one. You actually see daylight. It was just a very different style. Also, the villain, unlike the Joker, who was more of a psychotic maniac, this one actually had a plan of what he wanted to do, and he seemed to try and do things on a much larger and epic scale. I mean, there was a lot more background to the villain in this one. You got to know where he came from and why he wanted to do what he wanted to do. I also liked in the film that they linked several references from the first Batman, Batman Begins. Like they brought back Liam Neeson for a few minutes, they tied in the League of Shadows with what was happening around them. The Dark Knight Rises seemed to be on a much more epic scale than the first two films. It actually seemed as though what was happening affected either the whole country or even the world with what was going on, and it didn't just focus on Christian Bale as Batman, it focused on loads of other characters like Catwoman, and the villain himself, and the League of Shadows, and even the average guy on the street. I thought that the film seemed rather predictable, but it didn't falter it in any way. There were still twists in the film that you didn't see coming, or at least I didn't. Also, I think the acting in the film was very good. Christian Bale did his usual very good role as grizzly old Batman. I also like Tom Hardy, who played as Bane, the main villain. I know a lot of people will say that he's got a bit of a strange voice and he might not have gone, he might not be as good as a Joker, but I thought he was a lot better. His acting was good. He seemed like he knew what he was doing more than the Joker did, whereas the Joker was just out to cause complete anarchy. Bane actually had a plan and he knew what he was doing. I didn't like Gary Oldman's character as much in The Dark Knight Rises as I did in the first two movies. In this movie he didn't seem as emotionally attached to anyone, and it didn't seem that what he did affected anyone else in the movie, and he just didn't play it as well. For the first half of the movie I didn't particularly like Anne Hathaway as Catwoman. I thought she seemed a bit too arrogant and that she didn't really care about anyone else. She was a bit too selfish, but I think that's the way it was meant to be, because as throughout the film you tended to like her more and she started to turn over a bit nicer, and what she did affected everyone else, especially Batman. I thought that Michael Caine's role in The Dark Knight Rises was extremely good as well. He seemed a lot more emotionally attached to Christian Bale as Batman and what else was going on. I didn't particularly like Morgan Freeman's character in this film. I much preferred him in the other two, but in this one he didn't seem to care what was going on, and he wasn't in it particularly much. I thought that the effects of this movie were really good. I mean, there was plenty of really good action scenes, fighting scenes. I mean, when a gunshot went off, it actually sounded like a gunshot, and when a person's neck snapped, I mean, it sounded like the neck was snapping. The explosions were pretty good. I mean, they weren't over the top like Transformers, but they were still good. They had big, epic-sized car chases. I mean, Batman's on a bike at one point and there's literally like 200 police cars chasing him. Then they have a big fight scene and there's thousands of police officers going against all these like terrorist forces. They have a massive clash. I mean, they did that really well. I don't think they spent the budget of this film quite as good as they could have. I mean, it cost 250 million to make, whereas the Avengers only cost 220, which is still a hell of a lot of money, but they fitted a lot more in than this new Batman film did. That said though, it is still a really good film. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I just can't see how they spent more money on that, seeing as the Avengers has a lot more actors, bigger actors in than this one. I did find one or two flaws with the movie as well, like when the terrorist forces have got Batman's Batmobile vehicles and they're trying to drive away from him when he's in his new Bat aircraft, and they're shooting their cannons up at him, and it literally makes no effect whatsoever against his Bat aircraft. Yet in the other two films he shoots that cannon and it destroys, like, you know, half a city block or something silly, or a load of cars. Yet on this it literally made no effect. Yet Catwoman's on the Bat bike, she shoots into a massive bunch of cars and it just destroys 2/3 of it. She also shoots these Batmobile cars in the back and they just explode and crash, yet they have no effect on anything else. It just didn't seem quite right. Also, I know that this film's only a 12A, so they couldn't really put much blood or gore or too much killing in it, but there's a part when all these police officers are charging these terrorist lines, and the terrorists have all got, you know, G36 guns, and they're all pimped out to the max, and they start firing away at all these policemen, and there must be about 30 of them firing, and there's like 2 or 3 policemen dropping every few seconds, and they just get in and have a big fist fight. And I was thinking to myself, hold on a minute here, they're in a confined space, they're shooting hundreds of bullets in, and there's like a few people dropping. But setting aside that, because that's probably me just getting too critical with everything, I thought that the movie was very good. I'd give it a solid 8 out of 10, possibly a 9. It just had a few flaws which stuck out to me, but they might not other people. But yeah, the effects in the movie were great. It was a great follow-on from the first and second one, and like I said, it had quite a few good references in it. It was on a big epic scale. I like that. I like the way that also that the movie progressed in months as it went on. It didn't all just happen in the space of a week or a few days. Like the terrorists take over Gotham, or New York, which is what it actually is. They take over the city, close off all these bridges, as they were besieged inside this city, but are actually planning to blow up this bomb. Because as the film goes on, it looks all summery, and in the next minute there's snow on the ground. It looks all barren. People are like trying to survive. It reminded me of like a ghetto from Warsaw or something of World War II, but obviously nowhere near as bad. I mean, people weren't starving everywhere, but it was that sort of environment. You know, people had just left to fend for themselves, and it looked like they got curfews and they got guards patrolling the street. I mean, it's not a very nice place to be. So yeah, I think this film was generally very good. I think it was definitely worth me travelling 2 hours to see, even though it had a few flaws of it, and I would definitely think about buying this on DVD, but not necessarily Blu-ray. But yeah, I'd give it a solid 8 out of 10, possibly a 9, especially for Tom Hardy's character as Bane, the villain. I think he just did his part very well, and Christian Bale was good, Catwoman was good, even if Morgan Freeman wasn't as good as I was expecting, or Gary Oldman. They had a few references to Harvey Dent, but they weren't particularly friendly references. You know, people were thinking, oh yeah, Harvey Dent, he was such a legend, he helped with some organised crime. 5 minutes later they read Gary Oldman's speech, oh yeah, Harvey Dent tried to kill my son and he was an evil man, and you think, okay, right, the truth's finally out. So yeah, I definitely recommend going and see this movie, or if not seeing this movie, go watch Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. That's a good time. Okay, thank you very much for seeing my review, and please like and subscribe, and I'll upload more reviews when I watch the films. Thank you.